Bore da, croeso yma I ICC yn Birmingham. Mae'n nes I weld gwmynt ac yn mor ffres bore yma, mae'n rhaid gweithio. Anyway, welcome, and as John said, we're very pleased that you could come at this early stage, and it is, yeah, and you know, you've come this far, so let's take everything in. It's not easy to stand here and say that everything in the world is wonderful in the world of agriculture at the moment, and most certainly, for those of you who heard Myrick speaking yesterday, it is, you know, it's a case of wishing that things were better, but they aren't, and that's where we are. It's been a difficult 12 months. In all sectors are suffering as a range of factors, which include the Russian import ban, the slowdown in China, the strong pound, the poor retail behaviour, and we heard yesterday about how the price of oil most certainly has an effect on prices today. And of course we've had 85 days of rain. Well, if you lived in Eglwyswrw, which is a little village in Pembrokeshire, which almost, you've got to feel for them a little bit. They were 2 days short of being the world record wettest village in the world. I'm not sure that's something that I'd be very proud of, but anyway, that's how it's been this winter. Despite our current collective despondency, I remain optimistic for our medium and long-term future, and we most certainly heard that yesterday as well. I very much believe that our future lies in capitalising on market opportunities, grasping the opportunities that will arise from a country with generally good growing conditions, a tradition for producing world-class produce, and a professional workforce, with plenty of talent entering our industry at the moment, and a number of them are here this morning, so we're really pleased to see that as well. And that is why I, along with my Deputy President, John Davis, and our board chairman, are very keen at every opportunity we have with buyers of Welsh produce to encourage them to develop supply chain relationships that encompass farmer, processor, retailer, and food service providers. Some of you already secured those relationships. I am, as a beleaguered first milk supplier, I've just recently seen the difference that the arrangement with Tesco on cheese from Haverfordwest can make to our farming income. We must continue to build on these relationships to secure a fair share of the retail price back to our side of the farm gate. Whilst our future will rely more and more on the marketplace, we must also make sure that we have the conditions in Wales that support farmers, conditions that call upon farmers to thrive, and ensure that we do not encounter conditions that put us at a disadvantage compared to our competitors. The CAP, without doubt, continues to be a contentious issue, particularly in our farming communities. NFU Cymru remains firmly of the view that this must be a policy that underpins food production, that supports those involved in the business of food production, and is a policy that champions productive agriculture. We need to be in a position to capitalise on any opportunities that may arise from a possible mid-term review of the CAP to ensure that we have the CAP that's fit for Wales. Of immediate concern to us is the delivery of the remaining BPS payments to farmers in Wales. I'm sure that you will ask the panel questions relating to this, but it is unacceptable that those farmers that are still not paid have the level of information that they deserve to have and what they should expect to have. Trees and penalties associated with new land eligibility rules is another real concern for us, and I would like to thank our group secretaries and our policy advisors for all the support they have given our members in challenging those penalties, and that we feel in too many cases have been unfairly applied. Farmers care and manage over 80% of the land area of Wales, and we do a very good job of that. And I've spoken about the weather earlier, but as I've mentioned, but I don't think that our £2 billion tourism industry is based solely on sun worshippers. It is based on those coming to enjoy the landscape created and cared for by farmers. Farmers can eat, and will rise to the challenge of producing more food whilst at the same time caring for the landscape and the environment and meeting climate change targets. To do this, we want to work in partnership with government, developing voluntary initiatives rather than more regulation, making use of the Wales RDP to incentivise change for thousands of farms across Wales. We are concerned at the vast array of new environmental legislation coming our way, whether that be oil storage rules, the SAFA regulations, or the threat of NVZs. We question the evidence that's behind the legislation, whether the full impact of the legislation has been considered, and whether the government have properly considered the alternatives to regulation. Finally, my journey to becoming NFU Cymru President began as a result of my concern of the impact that bovine TB was having on my community. Whilst I do believe progress has been made over the past decade or so, bovine TB remains arguably the biggest threat to our cattle population. Statistics available from the Welsh Government via the new TB dashboard show that the situation is improving in many counties across Wales, but the statistic that stands out for me is the most recent data shows a year-on-year increase of 25% in the number of animals slaughtered as a result of bovine TB. TB, we all know, is a highly political issue, and I ask you all for the up-and-coming National Assembly elections to ask the candidates what they intend to do to tackle the disease in wildlife as well as in cattle. Thank you, and I look forward to an interesting debate with these top 3 civil servants from the Welsh Government. And we're really chuffed to have them here this morning. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Stephen. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Andrew Slade to say a few words.
Now then, let's move this on. There we are. Bore pawb, mae'n bleser o fod yma gyda chi. It's a great pleasure to be with you here this morning. Apologies if I haven't got much voice. I was trying to explain the finer points of cross-compliance over the top of Come On Eileen in Walkabout at 2 o'clock this morning. And my vocal cords have taken a bit of a hammering as a result. Whether the colleague I was speaking to got any value from that conversation remains to be seen. We're at a particularly interesting and important moment, and Stephen and John asked Christian, Matthew and I to say a few things about where we are now in terms of coming to the end of an assembly period, looking ahead for the next 12 months, and just giving you some sort of sense of the priorities and the issues that are on our minds as we look forward. But I think more generally we're in an interesting time in terms of the political cycle. Not only, as Stephen was just mentioning, have we got Assembly elections coming up in May, but we've also now got a date set for the referendum on our membership of the European Union, and these are both things in which you will have a strong interest. On the European stuff, I would just say now that the Welsh Government's position is unequivocally in favour of Wales being a member of the European Union and of course a member of the United Kingdom, and that is a point that ministers will be making very strongly during this referendum campaign. You've heard me speak before about the key strategic drivers of what we're trying to achieve in Wales. And one of the things I wanted to do, which is represented by the panel here today, is to explain that this is not about one set of policy interests trying to decide what to do within Welsh Government. It's about a joined-up effort. And Matthew, Christian and I spent a lot of time working together to make sure that our offer through the Natural Resources Department in supporting ministers is as joined up and strategic as it can be, with some really key drivers for what we're trying to achieve, including in relation to green growth, which you've heard me talk about before. That's really pushing an economic model which makes much better sense in relation to our natural resources and how we manage those, and really makes the most of the economic opportunities that come from our natural resources and managing those in a sustainable way. Another key area for us is that natural resource management piece, which is how do we make better use by working at area level with our colleagues in Natural Resources Wales and with other partners to try and tackle things in a way that makes sense to the natural resources of that place. And that's a big driver, and Matthew will say a bit more about that in a moment in relation to the Environment Bill and some of the other legislation that's gone through the Assembly recently. And then Christian, I'm sure, will talk about the Animal Health and Welfare Framework, which is a really important part of our strategic armoury in Welsh Government in terms of what we're trying to achieve on the animal health and welfare front. For me, for my side of the business, working with colleagues, the big ticket items, and you've heard me call them those before, are the strategic framework for agriculture, which is now being headed up by a partnership group led by industry with an independent chair, Kevin Roberts. That's getting going now, and I think it's making good progress, bringing people together, the key organisations, the key partners out on the ground, to move forward to an agriculture which is set out here as modern, sustainable and innovative. We're also pushing ahead with our food and drink action plan, where we target a 30% increase in turnover of Welsh food and drink, that's sales of Welsh food and drink, by 2020. And we are well on course to come up from the 5 and a bit billion where we started to just around about 7 billion in 2020. And that work is now being driven forward by the Food and Drink Industry Board, led by Andy Richardson, who some of you will know and may indeed be in the room. He was certainly with us for dinner last night, who recently led the review of the dairy sector in Wales and now heads up our Dairy Leadership Board. So these are two key individuals, along with Pereda, who heads up the Animal Health and Welfare Framework, really helping us drive areas of business forward, but working very effectively with the industry and with other stakeholders to make all this happen. The other key area then is around CAP and the delivery of the Common Agricultural Policy. And Stephen has talked about some of the challenges that we've faced this year in moving to a completely new system. A set of challenges that were exacerbated by coming to terms with the judicial review, which happened at the end of 2014 and successfully took us off our original track in terms of the payment model that we were going to adopt. And we've spent much of last year getting the new payment model in place and now getting those payments out. As at today, we have paid 86% of claimants through the BPS. That's around just under 13,500 farmers. It's worth about 115 million of that first part payment. We're on course to repay the remainder over the next few weeks and to get the balance payment, the final 20% or so, out during April, which is what we've said consistently since the middle of last year. Indeed, in the first week of the payment window opening in December, we paid over half of you out there in Wales. By the end of the year, 2015, we paid 2/3. By the end of January, we had paid 3/4. Now, I know this is not the same as some of the performance that we have been able to produce with the old system, where we were familiar with the terms and requirements of the scheme, and you were as well. But it is actually in the circumstances with what is undoubtedly the most complicated CAP reform of my career. And I know I look very young, but I've been doing this for nearly a quarter of a century. It's complex stuff, and we've had rule changes, within the last 12 months that we've had to incorporate. And that's been a major challenge at a time when public finances are under as much pressure as I can ever recall it. Indeed, as much pressure probably since the 20s and the 30s. So you're getting on now for 80 years. A very important point to make, though, in all of this, which is that we are very grateful to all of you for working with us through this period. This has been a period of change for all of us. Some of this has triggered, as Stephen said, concerns about how we're doing particular aspects of the mapping, particularly in relation to trees. And I know that there have been a number of appeals. In fact, I think we're up to about 1,100 appeals so far on declaration of land. And we have set up a rapid-fire, streamlined appeals mechanism to allow people to make those appeals quickly, and my team are working through those at the moment. But this is a move to a completely new system, away from a historic entitlement model to one based on land area, and it's a period of adjustment. That is the reason why we have a two-tier payment, part payment up front and the balance to follow, because we're busy establishing the total entitlements, the land that's eligible, across the whole of Wales. We will push on as hard as we can over the next few weeks to get those balance or get the remaining first part payments out. Like was said yesterday in plenary out in the main hall, my team have been working away hard at this for about a year, 7 days a week, weekend working and working into meetings and so on. There's a high degree of pride among my team about doing a good job, not just in relation to friendly competition with other parts of the UK on payment performance, but to get the money out to you all as soon as possible. In relation to the agriculture strategy, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things and then I'll come on to the RDP. We have, of course, very recently got going with EID Cymru, and the centres are now up and running with effect from the middle of January. That's going well, and I'm very grateful to HCC, who are our delivery partner in all of this, for making that happen. We're also pushing ahead with the project on CPH, the holding numbers system. We're working with partners across the rest of the UK to make that happen over the next 12 months. That's going to be a big project of work. And we're also, finally on the strategy side, really getting going on the climate change issues that came up, not least through the Paris conference towards the end of last year. We have an ambitious target in Wales of reducing CO2 by about 3% a year over the coming years, and agriculture's contribution is about 1/5 of that. So there is an imperative on all of us to tackle this problem. Stephen mentioned the RDP. The RDP is going to be worth the best part of £1 billion over the lifetime of the programme. It's funded from 3 sources. One, as you will be very aware, is the 15% transfer from the basic payment scheme. The second area is the financial contribution from the European Union, and the balance is made up from domestic funding from the Welsh Government. That is well on course now. We've opened up a number of windows for what are called expressions of interest. These are meant to be, and we're working on learning from the early rounds, an opportunity to get an idea into the scheme system in order then to follow up with a fuller application for those that get through the gateway onto the next level of the scheme. At the moment, we've allocated about 213 million of that pot money to various projects and programmes. That includes Glastier, the agri-environment scheme arrangements, and also the Farming Connect offer, which is the backbone for this programme, because as I was saying to colleagues yesterday in a couple of meetings, knowledge transfer, knowledge exchange is the key part of any successful development programme. Wherever you are in the world, all the evidence suggests that that's the key part. The other elements, the grants around capital, the grants to support land management and so on, are an important part of the package, but they come in alongside knowledge and understanding how to do things better, do things in a more innovative way, to add value and to save cost. More windows of opportunity for the RDP, including in relation to the Sustainable Production Grant, including in relation to the Food Business Grant, including on the rural community side, will open up at the end of this month, so in a matter of a few days, and we'll be getting going with a Glastier Small Grant scheme later in the year. I think that will probably do in terms of overview. Looking ahead, and I appreciate that these are difficult times, the potential of Welsh agriculture is massive. You have all heard me preach on this before, but I just make this point again to you. World population has doubled in my lifetime to 7.2 billion. By the end of this century, it'll be 12 billion. People need to be fed, and they need to be fed in a sustainable way at a time when our natural resources are under pressure. There is no better set of people than you lot and your colleagues out on the ground in Wales and indeed across the UK to help make that happen. And I believe that agriculture in Wales and indeed the wider food industry has a very prosperous and successful future ahead, whatever element of the cycle we're in at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, and now over to Professor Wilson.
Good morning, and I was told 2 minutes, Andrew, so I don't know what that was all about.
You know I'm no good at time.
So I know you're dying to ask questions, so I'm going to keep this really brief. We have, as Andrew has pointed out, an animal health and welfare framework for Wales that sets out our key objectives of making sure animals in Wales are healthy, that they're well cared for, and make no mistake, I do believe that that's the case now. We need to drive on to continue to make improvements. So healthy and well cared for, that the consumer can have confidence in Welsh produce and that we can protect public health. And through all that, gathering all that together, we want to make sure that in doing that, we are contributing to the rural economy and also helping to protect the environment. They're very important. And our framework group, working in partnership with the farming industry and the veterinary profession, have been identifying priorities to make sure that we can protect against the diseases that we do not have, that we can identify quickly the diseases that arrive, and that we can work together to control and eradicate the diseases that find their way into Wales and onto Welsh farms. And we've been exploring the working relationship and the roles and responsibilities. And if you think about diseases on a kind of spectrum, at the one hand we have those big ticket diseases such as avian influenza and foot and mouth disease, where government has to be very firmly in control. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have our economic production diseases such as BVD, lameness in sheep, and so on, where, of course, individual farmers and groups of farmers need to be focusing with their veterinary surgeons. And in the middle, we always have the focus on tuberculosis. And Steve has pointed out his views on that, and I dare say we'll have some questions later. But you know, people look at Wales and say, poor Wales, you've got TB, you can't do anything else, you're constantly focusing on TB. Well, I want to turn that round, because I see the TB programme as our moon mission. It gives us an opportunity to get down to detail and work out relationships together. It's given us an opportunity to get all the vet practices in Wales working together. That doesn't happen in England. In Wales, every single large animal vet practice is part of one of two consortia that do our TB testing. And as a result, they're now coming to me and saying, what else can we do together? We want to eradicate BVD. We want to work with you on sheep scab. So, you know, the opportunities that have arisen as a result of the TB programme, which is large, it takes more than 3/4 of the animal health budget in Wales, we need to recognise as an opportunity as well as a massive mission. And in terms of the tools that we have for TB eradication, you know, God said to Moses, what is it that you have in your hand? Use what you have, and that's what we're doing. And I think it's really important that we continue to do that as new technologies become available, new tests come online, new vaccines, new approaches to wildlife. And so with that, I want you to hold that thought. Let's use what we have and look out for the things that could be coming. And the final thing I'll say is that in terms of big challenges, let's not forget the threats of other diseases across the water. And we've talked about, you know, involvement in Europe and what the future is, but don't forget the immediate threat, blue tongue type 8 across the channel, and a risk assessment that that disease could arrive in Great Britain in the next 6 months. So think about what you're going to do to protect against that disease arriving on your farm. And I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Right, and finally, Mr Matthew Quinn.
Wel, barod â gyfeillio, a diolch yn fawr iawn am y gwahoddiad tro yma. I just want to briefly sort of talk about what's been dominating my year and which will continue to dominate. And that's been largely the two big pieces of legislation we put in. And those two pieces of legislation, Wellbeing and Future Generations Act and soon to be Environment Act, can feel a little bit distant at times. But for me, they're going to be very important for the way we work together. Steve mentioned up front this getting away from environment over here, community over here, economy over here. That's what this piece of legislation are about. They're about going back to doing the things that will help all of those aspects, so that you're developing in a way that is truly sustainable, because you've got the bottom line built in alongside the environment, the community and the cultural aspects that we all cherish. And you are in a fantastic position to do that. It will mean, again as Stephen said, that we'll need to work together in a different way. As Andrew said up front, we'll be working much more closely across our teams to make sure that the things we're doing are joined up. We're not always going to get that right, and you're going to draw that to our attention when we don't. That's fine. But it's also going to mean, you know, jointly taking responsibility. And I think the sort of opportunities we've been offering over this last period to do that, I hope are going to be ones that you'll take up. So the Nature Fund that we ran a couple of years ago now, in order to say, what can you do? What do you want to do? Back to the asking the question, not doing the regulation, if you will, how we do that. We're launching at the end of the week the SMS, which is the successor scheme to the Nature Fund, so that opportunity to do the big landscape management projects for the benefit of downstream communities in terms of water management, but also in terms of carbon. If we get this right, then the things that need to happen for the environment are going to be the things that are going to be helping to drive your business profitability. And that for me is the key aspect here. I have no interest in doing environment without doing the business side of it. That's not the way it's going to work. And the whole purpose of the legislation, the two pieces of legislation, is to achieve that. So Dan McRae is with us here as the new chair of NRW. NRW itself is going to be in this phase now of moving into the new requirements of the legislation to do this, to promote sustainable management of natural resources, with a real focus on the resilience of the natural systems. So not the sort of doing all the bits of detail, but actually making sure we've got an environment that's able to cope, that's able to adapt, that's where we're able to use the opportunities that that environment provides, rather than treat it as a sort of please keep off the grass sort of approach. That's a real opportunity with us all, but we will need to work together on that. We've spoken about payment for ecosystem services for ages. It's not a helpful phrase in many ways, but in some ways we've been used to that. But it's been in that sort of territory of the sort of income foregone stuff. I'm not interested in income foregone. I want this to be profitable. And I'm not interested in it being public subsidy going in there. I'm interested in it being other businesses paying for it. And we're just on the cusp where we're seeing that, whether it's small-scale stuff like Do Cymru paying for the weed wipers, or some of the bigger scale stuff like the First Milk has been doing in terms of its emissions in the Haven. We are seeing that coming through. Colleagues were over in Luxembourg talking to the European Investment Bank about the opportunity to invest using the Natural Capital Financing Facility, which has been made available by the European Commission this year or so. So a real opportunity to see those things coming through and actually being real money and real relationships. And what's been really striking in that is the extent to which you've been setting the pace on a lot of that. So I think there is that real confidence that we can be moving beyond regulation, that we can be looking at this as something that's being driven from your experience. There will have to be regulatory flaws. None of this works without regulatory flaws, I'm afraid, because you've got to go beyond that regulation in order to demonstrate to others that you're giving them value. But if we can work together, we can make sure we've got the right regulation, the sensible regulation, and regulation that actually fits with the different needs of the different parts of Wales. So that's going to be my mission over the next period. I look forward to working with you all to make that happen. Thank you.